attendees joining right now, and will be, I'm sure, some more coming along. So this is Talking Hobies. So this is another episode in our series of webinars about talking about Hobies and Hobie Cat sailing. So tonight's subject is all about upgrades, parts, sort of improvements to boats. It's a pretty big subject. We're going to cover a variety of ground with that, and we absolutely encourage your participation and submitting questions. So this is Zoom webinar. It's a little bit different than a typical Zoom meeting. The only people you'll see on the screen are the presenters, and we'll introduce them in a moment. But if you look around on your screen, you'll see some buttons, and one is called Q&A and one is called chat. And the Q&A is how you submit questions to us, and we will do our best to address those questions as we go. But feel free to, my contact information was in the invite, and feel free to send other questions if we don't get to them. We did have some questions come in advance that were really specific, and some were beyond the scope of this webinar, and I'm going to follow up with that person, one-on-one afterwards. But welcome, and thanks for joining us. So this is, like I said, a series of webinars really about Hobie sailing, and the COVID-19 pandemic has left us with a lot of time on our hands. So this is one way that we have found to interact with our members and our sailors around the world. So my name is Rich McVeigh. I'm the president of the International Hobie Class Association, and I'm your host. Who are we? We're a group of sailors from around the world. We're Hobie sailors and volunteers that organize Hobie sailing events worldwide. And we, since the pandemic has started, there's been enormous activity on social media and on websites with people getting involved in outdoor activities, in particular sailing. So it's been a perfect time to reach out to folks and try and engage and help them with their journey in Hobie sailing. All right, so let me introduce our panelists tonight. So we have Rob Jerry, who's making a return visit. Rob is the owner of South Bay Sailing Kayak in Brewerton, New York, on Lake Oneida. He's a Hobie dealer, and he'll say hi. Go ahead and say hi, Rob.
Hi, thanks for attending.
All right, and David Brooks. David is the executive director of the International Hobie Class Association, joining us from Australia. So it's early in the morning there. Say hello, David.
Good morning, Rich. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, everybody. And yes, it is bright and early here.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. All right. So what we thought we'd do is move through some topics here and start out with some ideas, and of course we can talk about anything in a little more depth as needed. But as I said, we encourage everyone to submit questions as we go. So upgrades to the boats and modifications to the boats is a big topic, and some folks really wonder, well, where do I even start? So let's start with some, let me share my screen again and show you some things here on where to even start. All right, so a great place to start is, for anything, is hobiecat.com. So this is the manufacturer's website, and folks even ask questions, well, where do I go to find and buy parts and accessories for the boat? Well, Hobie Cat maintains a really extensive network of dealers worldwide, and they sell their products through the dealer network. So a great place, if you just go to their page, hobiecat.com, and you go right to the top right here, you'll see it says find a Hobie dealer. So in here, you can select what type of product you have. In this case, fiberglass sailboat. You can put in your zip code or city and state, and it will locate the dealers that are in your area. Okay, so pretty easy. Great way to find out who is in your area if you don't know, and reach out to them and click on their information. Related to this, under these little blue, this little sort of stack of icons here, there's a link called support, and product support is where I am now. This is another great resource in that it has information and product support on Hobie Cat's entire line of products. So you can see, and even down below here, we have the older products that have been discontinued. So we could just click on one here, and let's just click on Hobie 16. So we can find links to lots of information here, from owner's manuals and tuning guides to, you know, more specific installation and help documents. Great resource, great place to go and find information. Another place.
Hey, Rich,
Yeah.
you might want to point out that there is also various languages available there too. There's
Oh, right. Yeah. So it's a good point. Yeah. So it does, depending on where you are in the world, it sort of defaults to that region where you live, and it sort of presents you with the language options. So, you know, it's smart enough to know that I'm in North America, and it basically just presents me with English language options. If I were to be in Europe, it gives me more selection, but all of them give you choices where you can change the language choices for your product information. The Hobie company runs a forum too, which I'm showing here, and this is on their website, and is another great place, a great community of sailors where you can reach out and talk to people, exchange ideas. But there's an enormous amount of information on this forum about the boats and about sailing the boats. And lastly, before I leave the site, I want to mention the parts and accessories catalog. There is a PDF that's on the site that has, this one is 72 pages of parts and accessories for the boats. And you can view it online, or you can actually ask for a printed copy to be mailed to you if you like. But it's a great way to browse and look at what's even out there that the Hobie company offers for many, many, you know, parts of the boats. And that towards the end, scroll to the end, they have these great sort of itemized charts that show every part and what the name of the part is and what the part number is. So if you're stuck on what do I call that part when I call the dealer and ask for it, you can look it up here and find all the part numbers and all the part information. Okay, so let's jump over to our presentation here that we started here. So talking Hobies. So again, I started out with where do we start? And I just talked about the Hobie website, the dealer finder, the support, the parts and accessories. Another great resource is the class site, which is hobieclass.com, and that's the site we maintain. We have tuning guides, we have links to information, how to find fleets in your region of the world, contact information, as well as news about Hobie sailing that's going on all around the world and in your region and other parts of the world. So great place to start. So before I leave this, maybe Rob, why don't you say for a minute from the dealer point of view, I mean, how does this support information and dealer finder information you know, help when people contact you and they are struggling to, you know, find what they need and select the right parts and accessories?
helps in a number of ways. One is I use it all the time because I don't know all the part numbers by heart or what they are. So I look and I can reference it. And in the modern era where most of the people that are calling me have computers, we can both get online, look up the parts together, and I can say, okay, I'm looking at this. Is this what you mean? And it can really make sure that we're talking about the same part and the customer is getting the part that they want and the part that they need. And it's a great way to confirm we're both talking the same language and about the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's probably nothing more frustrating than ordering something and getting the wrong part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sailing is a whole nother language, and without these, it's very hard to interpret what people are trying to explain. It takes a long time, but with the diagrams and everything, it makes it much, much easier.
Yeah, good point. Okay. All right, so let's keep going forward here. Come on, computer. Let's click on the right part here. Okay. All right, so I started out with this, and I think for anyone and everyone, set your priorities. What is your priority to what you need to take care of on your boat? And for me, the first priority is what I mentioned here at the bottom. Anything that is broken, worn out, or not working correctly, and that is your absolute priority because it's either going to prevent you from using your boat or it's going to prevent you from using your boat effectively. And here's a couple examples on this page. So starting right to left, we have this back of this hull here. It's missing a gudgeon. It's got some fiberglass damage. This boat is unsaleable in this condition, but this is not a showstopper repair. I mean, this takes a little effort, but this is not a repair that should prevent someone from using the boat. The middle picture is a really old image of one of the original sliders for the rear traveler on the 14 and 16. And while this part probably still
Excuse me,
works,
Rich.
yes,
The screen didn't change, so we're still looking at the catalog.
you guys are looking at the catalog. All right, I gotta change screen. Stand by. Good stuff. All right, here we go. Let's get to the right screen. How about that?
There we go.
Okay, very good. All right, so so the slider in the middle is an example of a really old part that you can get better enjoyment out of with a more modern traveler in this place. And on the left is example of a mast. This is a really common scenario where the little block, the sheave has broken on the mast sheet block, and that's not necessarily a showstopper to sailing the boat, but it's going to make your life more difficult and is an easy part to replace. Okay, let's keep moving forward. All right, so I thought we would start with new boats and kind of work our way backwards a little bit. And so here we've got two pictures of brand new boats, a 14 on the right and a 16 on the left. And what do you do with a brand new boat? What do you need to do with a brand new boat in terms of upgrades? Do you need to do anything? So Rob, why don't you jump in on this one here? This is really in your area of expertise. I mean, customers come in and they're ordering a brand new boat, and what do they typically need to do?
So the new boats come extremely well equipped. There's not a lot of stuff you have to do to them. They come standard with double trapezes. They come standard with jib traveler systems. They come standard with, for lack of a better term, the Hobie 20 style tiller connectors, which are a quick connect and with very little slop. The only things that they don't have that are necessary really is non-skid on the side rails, which without that, it's very difficult to trapeze. And then that's probably the only thing that's, in my book, absolutely necessary to sail the boats. The other popular options, since a lot of people that are buying brand new boats are racing, is the adjustable jib halyard system that allows you to quickly adjust jib halyard tension. It's basically an extra cheek block and a cam cleat. The cam cleat doesn't replace the horn cleat. You use both so that if the cam cleat slips, it'll eventually stop with the horn cleat. But you can make adjustments within a range real quick with that. And that comes into play for going upwind and downwind. And also as the winds increase or decrease, you can adjust your mast rake and jib halyard tension. The other item is a 6-to-1 downhaul. And basically it's a little mini set of 6-to-1 blocks like the Mainsheets primarily are. And that allows you to downhaul more and also quicker and easier than the standard system, which is now, I believe, might only be 2-to-1 now. It used to be 3. And those are the primary options that people add, along with wind indicators of their choice. With the new EPO3 rudders, rudder covers are pretty popular to protect them when you're not sailing. But like I said, the boats come very well equipped, and those are the main advantage or the main options that people put on.
Yeah, I would agree with those. And we're going to cover a few of these items a little bit further down as we go in the presentation. David, why don't do you see anything different from your perspective in Australia?
No, that's about what we're seeing here in Australia as the modifications go. The only thing I'd ask people is when they're looking at the modifications, also go back and double check your class rules to make sure you're not adding something that shouldn't be there. Like even with the downhaul cleats, make sure that they're the right way around, because the cleat's got to be at the bottom, it can't be at the top. So just understanding the class rules when you're going back adding the extra parts on.
Yeah, good point. And those class rules are on our website at hobieclass.com, just to remind everyone. All right, moving on. There we go. All right, so Rob mentioned just a second ago the rail in the rail kit. So the sidebar rail, when you buy the boat, comes uncovered, just bare aluminum. And most people like to have some covering on that to improve their comfort when they're sitting on it and improve their traction for their feet when they're trapezing. So this is, I agree, one of the sort of upgrades nearly everyone will do to their boat. And I'm showing two examples here. So on the right is sort of the neoprene rubber, or what's called also, they also sell a carpet version of it that's sold in the Hobie Cat Parts and Accessories catalog. Has been standard for many, many years. And then what we see now in more recent years is on the left, where you see that gray rail, and that's a product called HydroTurf. It's a similar product. It works very nicely. It's a little bit higher price point than the neoprene or the carpet.
Yeah.
All right, and then wind indicator, Rob mentioned those. I mean, most people find wind indicator to be really helpful, and this came out a little bit blurry, but shows you really probably the two most common wind indicators that most people will put on a Hobie Cat.
At least in the US.
Yes. All right, writing systems. So, everybody needs, for safety reasons, needs to have something on the boat so they can right the boat after a capsize. So what comes with the boat is just a piece of thick yellow line. It's probably 3 inches in diameter. So it's actually shown in the far left picture there. You can see it down the middle of the boat in the trampoline lacing. So this is the standard line. This is what I use, and what a lot of people use is just the line that comes with the boat. There's nothing fancy to it. It's just a line. You have to pull it out from wherever you stow it. You have to throw it over the hull, and you have to hang on it to right the boat. So the trick I use, this is my boat in the left picture here, is to run it down the middle of the tramp lacing in between the lacing, and it's just a friction fit. It kind of holds it in there nicely, and there's no ties. There's nothing holding it that I have to untie. I can just grab the end and yank it out when I need it. Another common way to store it is in the little trampoline pockets that come with the boats now. You can tuck it into the trampoline pocket if you like. These other two systems are still sold. They're still in the accessories catalog, and they the stretch back, I guess they called it the Hawaiian system, and the
Easy Right.
Easy Right. That's right. Thanks, Rob. So these were essentially a system that had a bungee cord somehow integrated in it. So it was already attached to the boat, and when you wanted to use it, you just grabbed it and pulled it out, and when you let go of it, the bungee cord retracted it. So I don't know, Rob, do you see many folks buying these in recent years, or?
Not as much as used to be a fixture on all the boats. And in recent years, people have gone away from it. Not really sure why, but most of the people are just using the writing line that comes with it. Mm-hmm. Probably, maybe we're flipping over less, so we don't need to write the boat as often, so we don't need it as easily accessible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've kind of observed the same thing. I don't know why, but right, it just seems the stock line has become more popular in recent years. But all of them work. All of them work really, really well. There's no reason not to use any of these. I don't know that anyone works better than the others. The lines with a bungee cord that stretch that pop back when you let go are probably the easiest to use and are when you right the boat, the thing just pops back into place, and you don't have to deal with any line that's dragging in the water or tangled up on something. But that you certainly need to have something on your boat to right the boat, just from the safety point of view. All right, Mainsheet systems. So this is one probably is a depending on how old your boat is a significant upgrade. So on the top left is the original Seaway 5-to-1 Mainsheet system that was sold with the Hobie 16s back in the early 70s. And since then, this block system has evolved several times over the years to a better quality product. The Harken blocks we use are a better quality product than the original Seaway blocks. But then the other issue is size, and we're going to show some screenshots of that and what the point is. So the point really is mass rake, right? So over the years, the entire community of Hobie sailors have discovered that the boat sails better with more mass rake. And that doesn't mean necessarily racing, it just period. It just sails better, period, with more mass rake. But the problem is you get into physical limitations of space. So for example, the space between the boom and the rear crossbar. And the original blocks were just physically larger than the newer blocks, so you would run out of space. So at some point you could keep letting your mast go back further, but the problem was you couldn't obtain the right sheet tension to properly sheet the sail in. And of course, if the sail's not sheeted in, it's not going to sail well. So over the years, the blocks have gotten smaller and smaller. So bottom left here is the current blocks. We're going to show some examples of that in a second. And then the two in the middle and the right are the Harken Hexa ratchet. They're a auto ratchet block. So this is an upgraded block over the standard block that comes with the boats in North America. And it basically, the North American block has a little switch to turn the ratchet on and off, where these blocks have a load sensor built in and automatically engage the ratchet based on the load. That part of it works very, very nicely. It just automatically does it for you depending on the wind strength. The downside of the auto ratchet block is it's a little trickier to adjust the cleat angle. And you can sort of see that in the center picture. It has this little dial there with three little screws in it. And it just takes a little bit more effort to get the cleat angle at your preferred spot. So I find, I've used this a bunch of times. The auto ratchet works beautifully, but I typically find that I am on a boat that I am just using for the day, or a boat that I've just using for the week, and I haven't had the opportunity to dial in the ideal cleat angle. I think it was, my boat, and I spent the time on that would all be fine. But when you're just on the boat for the day, I find it to be a little trickier. I don't know, David, do you have any experience with these down in your area?
Not a great deal, but you're right. Cleat angle is so important, because if you have it too low, they just cleat. And then when you're trying to, in gusty conditions, trying to release the main sheet, and you can't, it's cleated, and it's hard to uncleat. Same thing when it's too high, you're actually dragging against that bottom sheet, saddle there. And there are times when you need to cleat the main sheet. So yeah, it's important, the correct angle, but I don't see most of the people, as you say, have time to go and set them all up correctly, and they get them in the right position and they're happy with them. The other thing that I see is quite often they use a lot thinner rope on the blocks, so that they'll run a lot freer and a lot smoother. And I can also say it's not only the blocks that they're trying to get smaller, but also the shackles on the boom. You'll see them go back and use smaller shackles. Now, it's amazing what a difference that fraction of an inch will make, can give you that extra, that extra bit of tension on the leech when you need it. So yeah, they're always looking at ways of doing that. I've even seen people, I'm looking at the center one there with the traveler there. I've actually seen people machine those stoppers down and then put a thinner traveler line in there to try and get it down lower. I've seen just about everything done to try and get them, lower and lower to get more main sheet tension when they require it.
Yeah, good. That's a good segue to our next slide. We're going to show the point of this with some measurements. So before we just move on, the auto ratchet system you see in the top, and actually it's the one on the upper right. This is sold standard with the boats, the Hobie 16 boats in the European region. The bottom left is a system that's sold standard with the boats in the North American and Australian regions. All right, so here we show some measurements of just exactly what David was talking about. And you can kind of see there's 3 generations of blocks here that Rob was kind enough to photograph for us. So in the far left with the Seaway blocks, you're actually just seeing the bottom blocks and not the top blocks. And then the middle one, Rob, that's the 3-inch, right?
Yeah, that was the original 3-inch. Or no, that's the current bottom block with a 2 7 or a 57 millimeter 2 3/4 inch upper block.
Okay, yeah. So for a while that was the standard block, probably late 80s through the 90s was the standard size, and then right around 2000 we went to the one on the far right, which was even smaller yet, which is the 40 millimeter upper.
Yep.
So the whole point here is to get the blocks as small as possible so you can carry more mass rake, yet still have enough space between the boom and the rear crossbar to properly sheet the mainsail in. And these blocks are sheeted in all the way, and this is what we commonly call as block to block. They're pulled in as far as they possibly can go to where the upper and lower are actually touching each other.
And if you're switching to blocks like these, it's a little hard to see, but easier to see on the far right that the blocks are not strung straight through. There's a twist to them. They're actually strung 90 degrees to each other. And as you can see on the 40 millimeter version on the right, it's actually tied off to the side instead of the middle. If you try to do it, which would normally seem normal, just going from across the block, you won't be able to sheet properly.
Yeah, what you find is the line tries to jump off the sheave, doesn't sit properly on the sheave when it's, so the far right is the sort of the latest sort of lacing pattern to achieve that. Let the block sit down comfortably on one on top of the other. All right, so the same situation occurs with the jib. So the jib on the 16 is a fairly large jib, compared to a modern cut sail, and the same problem happens as you try to rake the mast back, as you run into a physical limitation of space where the clew of the jib gets too close to the front crossbar and you are not able to sheet the sail in properly just because you run out of room. So the top left picture and the one just below that show what was not the original, but was one of the jib blocks that was used for many, many years for the jib sheeting system on the 16. And it kind of stood up. You can kind of see it clearly in the bottom left. It stood up, it was a slider, and it stood on a little spring. And you had to pull that little pin up to move the block, the block in and out in the track. And there were a number of aftermarket systems that were added that you could add to actually add a line and a cleat to that, so that you could do it, adjust it without having to move the pin. But the standard arrangement was that you had to pull the pin and move it by hand. But you can see this is essentially, 4 inches. If you look at the measurement in the bottom left, off the front crossbar. So what was a common solution at the time, and there were many. So there were many systems that came out. There was a number that the Hobie Cat company sold, but there was a number of aftermarket solutions that came out over the years for the jib sheet system and the jib traveler system. And a really common one for many years was this little black Trentec car you can see in the bottom left images. And you can see it's much lower profile. It fit in the same track. The lines ran through the 2 center holes, and then the 2 outer holes were for the traveler system to move the car in and out. This worked really well for many years, and it's sort of a low cost upgrade that is going to last probably the lifetime of your boat. The only downside is it didn't have a block in it. It didn't have a pulley. So there was some friction in the system, but it let you achieve that lower, stack height between the jib and the front crossbar. So in the middle pictures here, you can see a modern boat, and this is what the current traveler car and cleat system is for the jib. Probably this one image right here shows it the best, where you see the sail and it's sheeted in very closely to the cleat. The image in the middle of the boat sort of sitting in the garage here is kind of how it comes, although maybe it's a little too small to see the whole system on there, but you can see there are little cleats in the middle that go out to the edge where the block is that work the traveler system that moves the car in and out. So I don't know, Rob, what's your thoughts on this? Do you see folks upgrading to this kind of thing these days, or?
So I think one of the reasons we're including this here is a lot of people with older boats who want to upgrade them and make them closer to what you'd get with a new boat. This is one of the upgrades you could do, along with going to the Trentec Black Knuckles. You would add a jib traveler system, which you were just describing, which would add a cheek block on the outside, corner castings that would allow a line to be tied to the car, go out through the cheek block, and then back to a cleat on the front crossbar. So you can now adjust your jib traveler position without necessarily having to go forward and lift that pin and slide it. And for a number of reasons, primarily one of the main times you want to move your jib car out is when it gets windy. And that's usually the last time you want to go forward, is when it gets windier. You don't have to go forward anymore. To finish the system, you would have bungees tied to the inside holes that would then pull the car back to the center when you release the cleat. So it was all kind of automated in that respect. And they were a very popular addition back in the day when the boats came with those standard cars that we're looking at. Nowadays, the boats come with perfectly good operating jib traveler systems, so we're not really updating those anymore. But for older boats, they're a really nice addition, and they're not terribly expensive or hard to put on.
Yep. And you still see you still actually see the Trentec cars are very commonly used in the European region, even on the newest boats. All right, rudders. So we did a whole episode on rudders. We archive these episodes on YouTube, on the Hobie Class YouTube page, and I would encourage you to go back to those. But I wanted to again mention here, because it is certainly a valid upgrade for your boats. better rudders and a better rudder system is going to make your boat steer better. And regardless of whether you're racing or you're just out having fun sailing, a boat that steers better is going to improve your enjoyment of your sailing. It's no fun when the thing doesn't steer well, and it's, you know, the rudders won't stay locked down. So spending some time with the system, making sure it's properly working, and you have a nice rudder system will just make your life better in terms of sailing the boat. So there's a number of rudders. I would encourage you to go back and look at our previous episode, but there's a number of options out there to upgrade your rudders in your rudder system. We're going to cover a few of them here. These are the actual rudder blades. So the current production blade is the EPO3, which is shown in the middle. This is a carbon fiber rudder blade, and it is the state-of-the-art rudder blade for the boats. It works extremely well. But this one on the top left was an earlier generation of rudder blade. It was a fiberglass rudder blade. And if you have a nylon blade or a Lexan blade, I mean, even upgrading to fiberglass, which is much, much lower cost than a carbon fiber rudder blade, will dramatically improve the steering of the boat. And lastly, I wanted to note, sort of in the right here, on the right side, I showed a rudder cover. If you're going to spend the money to get a nice rudder, spend a little extra and get some rudder covers. It's going to protect the rudder. It's going to protect it from the sun and also protect it from scratches and dings, which is just going to make your rudders last longer and perform better in the long run. All right, tillers. So continuing along the rudder system theme here. So Rob, why don't you jump in and talk about tillers a little bit here with these pictures?
Okay, so on the left, it looks like we've got the standard fiberglass tiller in the center. On the right, I believe that's a hot stick, which is a fiberglass telescoping tiller. And then on the left is a carbon fiber tiller.
Mm-hmm.
They all will still steer the boat. The fiberglass ones are kind of flexible and kind of heavy. So they gave way to originally the hot sticks, which were telescoping, which was nice. You could make them shorter or longer. It was easier to get them by trap wires and shrouds and stuff when you're tacking and jibing and moving forward on the boat and so forth. But were a little bit more expensive. They're also kind of heavy, and they also had a tendency to fail at the worst possible times when you're pulling hard on the tiller and all of a sudden it extends on you because it just didn't have enough friction for the amount of force you needed to pull, and then the boat doesn't turn. And then recently, carbon fiber tillers have been approved class rules wise and have become popular because they're much lighter. And even though when I say much, they might be a pound lighter. I mean, they're not hugely lighter when you're holding them in the middle, but when you're tacking and you're holding the very end of them, because of the leverage, they're much, much lighter than the fiberglass tillers. And it's much easier to move them from one side of the boat to the other. And without actually doing it, it's hard to imagine that it would make that much difference, but it really does. And it just makes tacking the boats that much easier. And then on the right-hand side, it just shows there's different connections you can use. On the left-hand side, these are both carbon tillers. On the left-hand side, it has the standard Hobie hinge. And then on the right-hand side, it is a Ronstand urethane connector. So to put the one on the left, it's just a matter of pulling the pin, pinning it on like you normally would. On the right, you do have to mount a little piece of hardware for that to clip into. It's not very hard. The advantage of it is it gives you a more solid feel, and it's easier to move the tiller about the boat. The one downside to the Ronstand connection is they will eventually break. It's pretty much inevitable. If you do use those, we recommend having an extra one in your spare parts. It's not going to break every time you sail. It's maybe once a year, once every 2 years, depending on how much you sail, but it's just a maintenance thing you need to look at.
Yeah, good point. I had one break recently and it wasn't so much fun.
Yeah. But what's nice about them is, like with the Hobie connector, there's little funky moves you have to do to get the tiller to twist around properly. And with the rod stand one, you just put it wherever you want. You don't have to worry about it hanging up.
All right, so let's chat about the hot stick for a minute. So the telescoping hot stick was like the sought after tiller for back in the, I don't know, many years, and of course that was made by a subcontractor. What Hobie didn't manufacture that directly, but it was very popular for many years, and some people still swear by them. But it's no longer available. That company has gone out of business. There is still a telescoping tiller available in the parts and accessories catalog that's called the Wildcat tiller, because it originally came with the Wildcat, but now it's available as an accessory for any of the boats. It's a little thinner than the old hot stick, but it's the same idea. You twist it one way and it unlocks, and you twist it another way and it locks. I guess my sense of these is they were enormously popular in North America, but David, were these ever really popular in your part of the world?
They were. Again, they were very expensive to buy. One of the things I see a lot of sailors used to use was electrical conduit. Now, because it was so flexible, you could move it around, and it was cheap to buy. For me, electrical conduit was one of the worst things you could buy, because in an emergency situation when you're trying to, head up, all that happens is the electrical conduit just bends. I've seen so many collisions with boats where the people have come back and said, "Oh, I tried to bear away, I tried to round up, and it wouldn't respond." That's why these solid ones are so much better. You get the feel straight away. You can, it's also when you're feeling the boats, when you're sailing, all the feel comes back through the tiller. So they're much more sensitive to sail. They're easier to sail. And again, for me, a long time ago, when I was getting my carbon fiber tiller extensions, I used to go to the fishing shop, and it's amazing how many fishing shops that actually repair fishing rods have carbon fiber fishing rods with the tip broken, and they're useless to a fishing rod, but they're actually perfect as a tiller extension. You can buy them at a fraction of the price. So that's what I was doing. But yeah, as I said, we see the electrical conduit, which I just think is just so dangerous to sail with.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so and I tip say from years of experience with these telescoping ones, sort of your worst nightmare of a telescoping tiller is if you get sand in it, and that is just a complete nightmare. The thing gets stuck, and it's so hard to get it cleaned out. So, all right, before we move on, these two on the right, Rob, these are ones you actually make and sell from your shop, right?
Yes, they are. Started doing that this fall, and used them at the 17s, and in training on the 17. It's kind of what started me making them, is because I couldn't find a good 17 tiller.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because that's extra long with the wings. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move on. All right, so Gudgeons, this is a little bit more into parts and not necessarily total upgrades, but the Gudgeons have changed over the years, and there are times that there are newer and better Gudgeons available now, and they've gotten better over the years, and there are times where you probably want to make a change. So on the left again is that boat with the broken Gudgeon on the top. What you also notice is the lower Gudgeon is missing its internal little sheave has fallen out. So that one needs to be replaced. And in the next picture, it's second from the left, as you can see, an intact set of upper and lower Gudgeons. This was the original Gudgeons. These were like they weren't pressed. They were kind of like a welded, Gudgeon, and these work, but they tended to break after a while. And that's what happens when they broke, is what you see on the far left there, is it made a mess of things. If you have these, you need to keep an eye on them and inspect them right at the weld joints to look for cracks, because once they crack, they will break. The upgraded version of the two-piece one now is the picture that's third from the left, was a die stamped Gudgeon, still a two-piece. All the holes matched up perfectly. These did not seem to break in my experience, and were much better than the original ones, but those have been discontinued in favor of what you see on the far right. So the far right is a one-piece die-cast Gudgeon. It has many more screws, for example. For one, it has more attachment points for the pin to go through, and these simply do not break ever. This has been standard on the boats for, I don't know, maybe 20 years now, and it works perfectly. It just works. There's even little plastic bushings that fit into the holes, and you replace the little bushings over time to keep that tight sort of connection between the pin and the Gudgeon. In years past, what would happen is you would have steel on aluminum directly, and something's going to wear. So the newer style has these little plastic bushings that accommodates that. The bushing is going to wear out. It's easy to just get some new bushings and pop them in. The only downside of this upgrade, if you have the original two-piece Gudgeons, you can upgrade to the one-piece. But here's a big but. It's not a plug-and-play switch, because the holes do not line up. Some of the holes will match, but some of them will not. So to make the switch, if you have to do it because you have like transom damage, for example, that one on the far left there, it can save your boat and get you away from the transom damage issues that you've had with worn out holes over years, and sort of restore that tight connection to the Gudgeon to the back of the boat. But it's going to take some effort. You're going to have to fill in some holes, and you're going to have to drill and tap some new holes. The other thing that's going to happen, if you can you can't see it too clearly, but you can look at the picture where you see the rudder, the lower casting, how it fits on the boat in this middle shot. The black one-piece Gudgeon, depending on the screws you get, the screw heads can be larger. And the consequence is that if you try and put an old lower rudder casting onto a one-piece Gudgeon with larger screw heads, it's not going to turn all the way. It's going to hit the screw heads. So you have to find the right size screws to make it fit, or you have to do some really creative work with a die grinder to clean out that restriction between the screw heads and the lower rudder casting. It sounds like a lot, but it can be done. And like I said, if you have transom problems with your boat, chronic transom problems, that's a solution. But just be aware, it's going to take a little effort to do the work.
Rich, I think the second generation stainless Gudgeons are still available.
Yes, I believe they are available.
They're not discontinued, they're just not stock.
They're not stock anymore, but those are a plug-and-play solution, and they don't break.
Yep.
So
the one thing that does happen are the Gudgeon screws. The Gudgeon screws tend to back out for some reason on those, so you want to use Loctite or something and to pay attention, because if they back out, then the screw will break. Mm-hmm. And you'll have the same issues, and then you have a screw broken off, and that's a tough fix.
Yep. All right, tiller connector. This is another part that's changed over the years. There's been a bunch of versions. So this connects the tiller to the tiller crossbar that goes, across the back of the boat. And they all work when they're new and in good working order. They all work. But what happens is, as you can see on this one on the left, is they get corroded and the parts start to wear out. And then what happens is you get slop So now your rudders are kind of wiggling around back there, and things aren't giving that nice, precise steering feel. So it's sort of like driving an old car down the road, right? With a loose steering system where you can move the steering wheel over the place and nothing happens. So there's been a number of improvements over the years. The middle one was a direct replacement just of the little parts or the connectors. And then the far right is what's now been termed to be the ultimate solution, is what's called the Hobie 20 tiller connector. It was introduced with the Hobie 20, I don't know, 20 years or so more, right, Rob?
25,
but
30.
It just works. It works better. The connection is very precise, and it's also super easy to disassemble. So there's just these little clips on a bungee cord, and in a matter of seconds, you can disassemble and take everything apart versus having to get, tools out and, take the bolts apart and hope you don't lose anything. So easy is an easy improvement to do to improve the feel of your steering system. All right. Moving out of steering and into trapeze systems, another area where there has been a lot of aftermarket products over the years, as well as changes in what was production over the years. So maybe look at the top right here. I was trying to show. So the basic idea of a trapeze system is you have a wire that comes down from the top of the mast. And you can kind of see this guy in the blue shirt off the edge here that's reaching up his left hand. So the wire comes down, there's a little handle, and right below the handle, there's a block. Going through the block, there's a white line with a little stopper that to the right continues down to some sort of hook of trapeze ring. And that trapeze ring then goes to a hook on his trapeze harness. Now backing back up the white line on the left, the other end of it is a bungee cord. So when he disengages from that system, the bungee cord retracts it and doesn't flop all around. So that's the basic idea of trapezes. And you can see that in the two pictures we're showing here, but there are a lot of aftermarket options in the pieces. So the top left shows the rings that are used on the currently in production, but there have been many other rings used over the years, and there have been many other rings used on other boats. And the reality is all these rings work. It's kind of what you like, and if it's what you have works fine, there's no need to replace it. But these ones we have now are they have a plastic handle and they have sort of a vinyl coating on them, so they work well. It's easy to hook into it, and it's not a big piece of metal that can fly around and whack you in the face. Because what can happen when you release that thing that's under load with the bungee cord on it is it can fly around and hit somebody in the face. Anyway, and then there are adjustable systems, and we're going to show a couple examples of that. But the bottom left picture here shows a lot of the bits that you would need to put an adjustable system in. An adjustable system lets you change the height that you're hanging. So if you look at this guy sort of on the left here on boat 31, you can see that the crew's hanging pretty low, which gives them great leverage to hold the boat down. But there may be times where the sea state is more significant, and hanging that low might not be as comfortable. So in the stock system, you have to move a little plastic stopper, which is easy enough to do, but is not something easy to do while you're sailing. In these adjustable systems, you can change it on the fly in a matter of a second, how high you are hanging or on the trapeze system. It takes a little bit of work to get these installed. Typically the wire has to be a little bit shorter. So it just depends. There's no right or wrong here. It's what you like. My observation is that these adjustable systems are more common on boats like F-18s and on boats like 505s and some of the Ds, where they adjust their height a lot. But on boats like a 16 or a 14, they're less common. All right, so Rob, this is your setup here. So why don't you tell us about this?
So these are actually synthetic trapeze systems. This one's off of a Wildcat, and it has the adjuster that Rich was just talking about. But the other thing, there's a couple reasons to upgrade to synthetic trap wires. They're lighter for weight purposes. They're price-wise comparable to wires, so you're not going to pay a lot more for them. But I think from a safety standpoint, they're much safer because you can cut them, God forbid you ever needed to. Very hard to cut stainless steel wire if that's what's holding you down. The synthetic wires can cut with any knife, other than maybe a butter knife, but any knife that you'd have sailing. And when I make them, you look on the left, you can see there's a little tail sticking out. And that's not just because I'm lazy and I don't want to bury it. That allows you to adjust the trap wire height without having to mess with the black stopper and items like that for when they're made for a 16 without the adjustment system in it. So it's a little bit easier to adjust your trap wire. You're not going to do it while you're on it, but between races and stuff, it's a much easier adjustment than the black stopper. And they're now class legal on pretty much, I think, all the Hobies. David would probably know that for sure.
Sorry, I was just looking. One of the panelists asked a question about the Hobie 16, whether adjustable trapezes were legal, and I was just going through the class rules. So that's what sorry about that, Rob.
That's all right.
But no, just also another point with the you're talking about the hooks that we have there.
No, synthetic trap wires.
Yeah, but the ones with the hooks that we've got there, not too many people know that. That was actually made by a company back in the 1980s, and the spreader in the middle was breaking. And then it was redesigned by Michael Metcalf, who was the first Hobie 17 world champion. So those hooks are actually designed by a world champion. As for the trapeze wires, the trapeze wires shall be stainless steel wire. And they can be trapeze wires may be replaced with any line or material of not less than 25 millimeter. So if you are going to go back and put the synthetic wire back on there, they must be stainless steel. Oh, sorry, unless you're going back, and that's what the class rules go back and say for the Hobie 16.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so David, are you seeing many of these systems in your area?
No.
No, so much? Okay.
No, I don't see it. I mean, I see all sorts of systems around the place there, and people go back and do whatever they want. The other one that people are going to have to be aware of for class racing, when we get to 2023, we're going to have a quick release system on the trapeze harness itself. And that must be to an ISO standard. And that's come back from World Sailing, because we've seen some tragedies before where people have been trapped. So World Sailing have now gone back and said from 2023, and they've tried to bring this rule in before, and then it keeps getting rejected and pushed back. And I think they've now gone back and said, that's what they're going to do. We're going to have to go back and have a quick release system that meets an ISO standard or equivalent to an ISO standard.
Yeah, so that refers to the actual trapeze harness.
Harness, yes, that's right. It's the harness itself. So in other words, the hook will have to come back out.
Yeah, and that the point of that is safety to prevent entrapment. Actually, I did another video on that a while back in sailing gear and demonstrated that. And I've used my trapeze harness has a releasable hook system on it. Works very, very well. In the event of emergency, you can disengage yourself from the hook, but it doesn't come off if it's not an emergency. You have to pull the line to release it. So, yeah,
we are working on. I mean, there's a lot of people now working on this around the world to try and get a really good system. And the main thing is that the hook itself from the harness comes away. So this is not on boats, but yes, just with the trapeze harness to make it safer for people.
All right, let's keep moving on. All right, so other areas that are commonly discussed here, jib halyard systems. Really, you see a lot of discussion of this. So on the left here, the left two photos are the original jib halyard system on the 16. So essentially, it was a wire that hooked to the head of the jib. It went up to the top of the mast to this big sort of stainless block up there, and then the wire went down the mast. And what you see in the picture, second to the left, is that block system came down, and at the bottom there was a piece of line with a 3-to-1 purchase that tied off and tensioned the jib halyard system. This was standard for, I don't know, probably 30 years, long time. Somewhere around 2000, I want to guess, is the manufacturers switched over to what's called the Aussie jib halyard system, which you see in the two pictures to the right. So the diagram sort of shows how it works. There's a wire forestay, and then the part that attaches to the head of the jib is just a block with a piece of line that now has a 3-to-1 at the top of the jib system, and then goes down all the way down the mast to where it secures at the bottom. And you can sort of see that in the far right picture with this aerial photo of the white sailboat. And you can see all the purchase at the top of the jib there, and it runs down the mast. And we're going to show a couple more shots of this here in a second. Ooh, click here, Rich. Okay, so then this system comes down the mast here at the bottom, and this shows what is now optional equipment, but class legal, is the adjustable jib halyard system. In these two pictures where the line comes down the mast, it goes to a cheek block, it goes back up to another cheek block, and then down through a cam cleat to a horn cleat. And this gives you the ability to more easily make adjustments to your mast rake. Remember, we talked a lot about mast rake and its implications for how the boat sails. So just improved how the boat sails. This is an optional upgrade to the boats, but is very common in for people that race the boats. And it's a good upgrade really for everyone, because it really makes it a lot easier to tension the jib and adjust the jib. So, all right, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit just for time here. Downhaul systems, another really nice upgrade to the boats. The original boats just had a 3-to-1 downhaul system. You had to pull really, really hard to tension the downhaul and pull it down. And there's an optional upgrade now to have a 6-to-1 downhaul system, which you can see in the far left. The other picture here to the right is a Hobie 18. It has a slightly different system than the 16, but the same idea, an adjustable downhaul system. And this is sold as a kit from your Hobie Cat dealer. You can buy just the downhaul, or you can buy the whole downhaul, adjustable jib halyard, and adjustable outhaul system as a kit called the Power Pack. And that's a really common upgrade for both new and old boats. Rob, you still sell quite a few of these, right?
Yeah, they're a very popular upgrade.
Yeah, and essentially it just makes it, whether you're just out for fun or you're racing the boat, it just makes it easier to sail the boat, and it makes it easier to tension the sails and adjust the sails. So
again, if I can just add there,
yeah,
that with that, the cleat must be used at the bottom.
yes,
You can't use the cleat from the top.
yeah. So the cleat you can see here in the picture on the far left has to be on the bottom, and there's a little part up that you get with the kit that mounts the block into the mast track. And then on the adjustable jib halyard system, there are specific measurements in the class rules on where all the pieces get installed. All right. Oh, so another great upgrade to think about is sails. We did an episode about a month ago on sails, and again, I encourage you to go back and look at that. But it's a great upgrade, especially if you have old sails. I mean, the sails are the engine of the boat, and that's a great place to upgrade your boat and increase your performance. Again, it doesn't matter if you're racing the boat or just going out for fun. It's going to make the boat sail better. And even If you have really old sails, I mean, even buying a used sail that's newer than what you have, I mean, the people that race the boats will change their sails pretty frequently. And, you know, there's a pretty good used market for sails that are, you know, 3 to 5 years old. So if you have 20-year-old sails, you can find a used set that's only a few years old that would be significantly less expensive than a new set. But absolutely new is new, and that's the best. You know, if you are willing to spend the money for new sails, you won't be disappointed. But go back and look at our episode we did on sails here about a month ago. It's on YouTube. All right, lines. So Rob, this is again you. Why don't you jump in and talk about this?
Yeah, so forgot to mention a little earlier when we were talking about new boats, but the lines are another thing that get changed quite often when people buy new boats or are upgrading. Although the line packages that come with the boats now are much better than they were 5 or 10 years ago, there's still some idiosyncrasies that some people like in different lines. One of them being the jib halyard is a super strong, super low stretch line, but it's kind of slippery. It's a straight Dyneema line, and it has a tendency to slip. So a lot of people will change out to a line that's like in the center there. That's a Dyneema cord line, so it still is very strong, very extremely low stretch, but it has a polyester cover on it so that it holds in the cleat a little bit better, especially the cam cleat that is in the jib adjuster system. The other lines there are basically jib sheets. I think one's 7mm, one might be 8mm. What's coming standard now is 7mm. That's Dyneema cord. This one is got a Dyneema and polyester cover, or not, yeah, polyester cover. So it absorbs very little water and it's very low stretch. Some of the complaints with the newer lines is stretch, and with older lines, they all stretch compared to these because most of the lines on the older boats are all Dacron. And in the day, Dacron was the low stretch line, but as time moves on, better products have come out and we're now into Dyneema. Or you might also hear the term Spectra, same material. One was made in the US, Spectra, and they call it Dyneema in Europe. And then another popular line, which I didn't have in stock to take a picture of, but Rich showed it earlier, is Salsa line, which is a Spectra. It's a solid braid Spectra. These are all double braid. So it's just one braid and it's Spectra and I think polyester together. It has a really nice feel and it's very flexible and very light and tends not to kink up, so it goes through the main blocks much better. And it's a very popular main sheet. And those are all upgrades that a lot of people do with new boats. And then also, if they're replacing older lines, what they might move up to.
Yeah, good. So Rob, we had a question come in from one of our viewers, and the question was, when should you replace your lines?
So that's a hard one to pin down to an exact time. It's mostly an inspection, Dacron, and if you have someone through nylon or some other really inexpensive line on there, you might just want to replace them just to get better stuff. But the other thing those do is they tend to get stiffer as they're exposed to UV. So if you find them not wanting to go through the blocks, they don't want to bend very well, could be a reason you'd want to replace them. And then the most obvious reason for replacing them is when they're starting to chafe and fray and look like they're going to break. They should definitely be replaced. Yep. But for the most part, if you can inspect the line and it looks to be in good shape and you're happy with it, probably doesn't need to be replaced. If you're looking at it and it's looking sketchy, like, oh, it's starting to fray, it's getting all fuzzy, well, that's pretty obvious sign that it's ready to be replaced. And then the little less obvious one, like I mentioned, is if they're getting stiff and they don't want to bend and turn around the objects that they're supposed to turn around.
Yeah, good.
Rob, just one of the questions there we always get asked, you know, with the new Dyneema and lines like that, what sort of bend can you put on them? At one stage there, the lines, you know, while they were really strong and they wouldn't go back and they wouldn't stretch, when you started to put them around sheaves and things like that, that's when they used to go back in there and they'd break. Are the newer ropes much better now with the going around sheaves? And also, because the strength's on the inner core, and of course, all we've got on the outside we can see is the outer core. So how do you know when the inner core is starting to wear or possibly break? That's a question all people always ask me.
I think that is from back in the day. There was Spectra and Vectran. Spectra is, I don't know the chemical makeup of it, but Vectran was basically Kevlar, or a newer generation Kevlar. Kevlar didn't like to bend. It liked to stay straight. Dyneema is more forgiving for bending. And I don't have an exact answer to that, but we've been using Dyneema halyards for an extremely long time, 10 years. And up here, we have not seen them failing very often. And again, a lot of it is indicated by the outer cover. You will start to see issues in the outer cover when the inner cover, when the core is starting to go, because it can't take the load that the core can take. So it will stretch and distort and fray. It's a little more subtle than just fraying, but your line will start to look funny if you're looking at it closely. Most of the places it does break is near the cleats where they're fraying, because they will chafe on the cleat. And a lot of times what happens, especially with the Aussie halyard, isn't so much it bending at the top as the halyards will twist. When you put it up and you don't look up to make sure that your purchase system is straight, you have those three lines coming down to the block, and that block twists. And when that's all twisted, it puts a lot of strain on the line, and it creates chafe points at the blocks, because the block sides, especially the top one, is metal, and that can cause those halyards to break prematurely. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but
yeah,
it's close.
All right, good. All right, so this was one of our questions came in, and just to make mention of it is another upgrade possibility. So this is a Spinnaker kit on a Hobie 16. It's not something that is really popular in North America. It's a little bit more popular in Europe, but it is optional equipment, and absolutely the manufacturer sells it, and they sell the entire kit with the sale. I don't know, David, do you see many of these down in Australia?
We used to. There's still a few around. We don't see it, racing very much at all. It's not as popular. Certainly in Europe, it's very, very popular. The Europeans run their own European Spinnaker Championship there. There's also a couple of countries, I think, off the top of my head, I think it's Austria. That's all they race, Hobie 16s with Spinnakers. They don't seem to race anything else. It is quite popular in France, Germany, Denmark, and as I said, in Austria. So yeah, it's raced very heavily in Europe.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, it's not that popular in North America, but it's definitely an option that's available. So, all right. Let's see what else we got. All right, so this is one I threw in here. So this is not really a boat upgrade, but beach wheels. So in my opinion, I mean, you don't realize how great beach wheels are until you have them. And then you're like, oh my God, why didn't I do this sooner? Because a good set of beach wheels makes your life so much easier in terms of everything you do with the boat. And it protects the boat from getting all scratched and screwed up on the bottom when you're not dragging it around anymore. I mean, these things last a very long time. They people are a little bit hesitant because of the price, but they last so long. I mean, one set of beach wheels will probably last your lifetime with the boat, and it just makes everything so much easier. And I mean, I'm at the point that I recommend these things. They're like worth their weight in gold. They're just so much easier to make your life better. So there's a couple of brands out there. They all work really well. The Cat Trax brand is the one that's very popular in North America. There's another brand in Europe, I think it's called Eurotrax, Rob, is that right?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, they're still around. They used to be in the US. They stopped importing them, but I think they're still available in Europe.
And then, the other brand with the smaller wheels, I can't off the top of my head.
Rollies?
Wheelies, yes, that's it. Is the other brand that works very well with this little bit smaller wheel. But the idea of the wheel size here is part of the thing. This big, low pressure tire is what rolls really nice on sand and soft surfaces. So you'll see like dinghies will often use a much smaller tire, but they are lighter and they're often launching off a hard surface ramp or a harder surface. So versus sand and soft surfaces. So they can kind of get away with the smaller wheel. The big wheel is what you really want. So, all right. Okay, so a couple questions that come in. Maybe it's time to jump on those. So one person pointed out SeaTac also makes dollies. Yeah, there's a couple brands out there that dollies that I've kind of commented on the most popular ones. We had a question about shroud anchor pins, and this kind of goes, it's not necessarily upgrade, but more maintenance. So the shroud anchor pin, if you look at this boat in the image, is right where the shroud comes down and attaches to the hull, and is the pin that actually, the physical connection between the hull and the shroud wire. And if these pins need inspection. I don't have a handy picture. We showed it in actually one of our earlier episodes. You could probably go back and look for it, but these pins need inspection, and they can break and they can fail. And if they fail, your mast is going to fall down. I mean, it's what's going to happen. You're going to demast. And of course, there's typically no warning when it happens, and it's pretty much ruins your day. So you don't want to do that if you can avoid it. So I check these things all the time, and I replace them pretty frequently, probably more frequently than most. I don't know. I mean, Rob, what's your recommended replacement cycle on those?
So to me, they seem to be something that's either going to last a lifetime or they fail within a few years. And there's very little in between. Jonathan asked about, they do have a new style anchor pin, and it came, I think, out of Europe. And so it's beefed up. Really hard to explain the difference. When you see it, it's very obvious, but it's got a much bigger collar. But I think recently Hobie had a run of skeptical anchor pins, for lack of a better description. They didn't all fail, but for some reason they had a higher failure rate than they used to. And because of that, they redesigned them and came out with a new version. And the new version looks pretty bulletproof. Time will tell. But like everything else, shrouds and stuff, we talked about this a while back in a different episode. 10 years down the road, it's probably not a bad idea to replace stuff like that. They're relatively inexpensive. The anchor bars, which the pins screw into, which is underneath the lip of the boat, they're pretty bulletproof. So you don't, and they're the really expensive part. So you don't have to replace that. They just unscrew and then you screw the new one in. You're probably good for another 10 years, especially if you get the new version. And not quite sure how to get you a picture of the new version so you can see the difference, but we can work on that maybe at another episode, or just contact me and I can show you what those are.
Yeah, I think that the key message there is inspect them, check them, and be aware that they do need to be replaced occasionally. So, all right, let's jump on. So, okay, so this is a nice little chart Rob prepared. It's sort of about different upgrades and sort of cost and benefit, advantages. And Rob, you want to chat about this? You prepared this earlier today.
Yeah, so let's see. It pretty much goes in the order that we discussed stuff. It mentions the upgrade we talked about, and then I gave it a rating of kind of how significant it is to the performance of the boat. 1 being significant, and then 5 being very significant. Then the next column is how hard they are to install. Again, it's goes from easy, moderate to difficult, and that's a pretty random assessment. I based it on easy being don't need any tools. You just pop it in. A lot of it, like wind indicators, they just snap in place. Some of the stuff you're pulling on and off anyway, like your Mainsheet, so you would change that out. A moderate difficulty means you need hand tools to do it, and difficult means you need power tools. So that's what that column's for. And then cost, it's sort of self-explanatory, but low was like under $50. Or I'm sorry, very low was under $50. Low was like 50 to 100, 150. Medium was 150 to 5. High was 5 to 1,000, and then over 1,000 was very high. Just to give you an idea of how much you're going to spend versus maybe the benefit and how hard it is to do. And then a quick description of what the advantage of that particular upgrade would be.
All right, excellent. All right, well, this kind of gets us to the end here.
Which we did have one question. Someone asked if there was a way we could share that chart with everybody.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me work on that with David, and we'll post that on the website. So look for that.
That's it. Yeah, that's easy. So if you send it to me, Rich,
yeah, so
I'll go back and put it on the website.
We'll post that here in the next day or so on hobieclass.com. All right, so just to wrap up here, so you know, there's a lot of options out there for your boats, and some make your life easier, and some are certainly worth doing, particularly if you know the existing parts you have are worn out and need to be replaced. Make a lot of sense, but you know, this was just an example of you know what can be done. This is not a painted boat. This is a brand new boat. And yes, it's black. And if you want to spend the money and you're willing to wait, they will build it for you. But anyway, it was kind of stunning when I saw it, and I had to pop out my phone and take a picture. So anyway, why don't we wrap up unless there's any other questions coming in. Thanks for participating tonight. This was recorded, and we'll be archiving this on YouTube here in the next day or so. And like I said, we'll post that little chart on the website as well. So thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks to our panelists, Rob and David, for participating. And happy holidays to everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll look forward to seeing you soon, probably another episode after the holidays, but we'll keep doing, and we'll keep trying to change up some of the topics and, you know, make it interesting for different folks to join in on. So, all right. Thank you.